Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Fine. Happy Columbus Day.
Hey, thanks, Mickey, and the same to you. I was wondering, do you ever think of Blogging Heads TV as kind of the Nina and Pinta and Santa Maria of the Internet, kind of, voyaging across uncharted waters?
No.
You ever think about that?
No. I think it's the inmates taking control of the asylum. I mean, we're completely unnecessary for Blogging Heads. These other guys have gone on and done dialogues and done land office business. They don't need us anymore.
You mean the other people that we graciously allow to appear on Blogging Heads TV?
Yeah, they don't need us anymore. Blogging Heads.
They've been doing good traffic. You and I did not do a dialogue at all last week, and then the week before that, we each did other people, so we didn't do each other. And I was expecting this avalanche of email, saying, "Where's the Bob and Mickey dialogues? They're the center of my spiritual life," stuff like that.
No, it turns out we're completely unnecessary.
Yeah, nobody noticed. The one email I got was from Isaac, who used to work for us, right? So there's nobody that I haven't actually paid money to who shows any signs of appreciating us.
It's a start. It's like the ink spot strategy. We start with Isaac and then we move out.
Yeah.
But it really is pathetic that, even before Blogging Heads has taken over the world, its founders have been retired unceremoniously. But hey.
I wouldn't go that far, but these other people have been doing good business, good traffic.
Yeah, no, I guess it's
I like
good.
Good traffic.
I guess it's good. And we're going to claw our way back into the public consciousness starting today.
We are. I've got a cold. You didn't ask me how I am at the beginning, as is your custom. But
I thought it did.
I just wanted to tell you, I've got a cold, and I seek your sympathy.
You have my full support.
Thank you. So are we going to talk about North Korea?
I'm afraid we are.
Okay. So far, we're doing well.
Yeah, we're doing great so far. I mean,
and that was a good point too.
Well, the obvious political point is that it changes the subject from Foley, so it's good for the Republicans because they'd rather have an inconclusive debate over missile defense than.
Yeah, maybe we could save that for the end of the North Korea discussion. Then it would be a transition.
But I already blew it. Okay, well, what do you think should be done? I mean, it seems grim.
Well, that's not the only question. I mean, I can always switch into my default blame Bush mode for starters. There are two questions. Where do we go from here? How did we get here? I could spend a little time in blaming Bush for this.
You really think there was a way to prevent North Korea from getting the bomb?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, this is not that important, but in kind of denouncing this and seeking international support to do something about it and then trying to prevent it in the first place, we would have been in better shape had Bush himself not dismissed the nuclear test ban treaty, which has been awaiting ratification in the Senate for years now, with a Republican Senate that refuses to ratify it. And Bush, unlike Clinton, did not champion it. That would help. But there's a much bigger source of blame for Bush here. Last night I actually went to bed thinking things were looking better in the region, because the new Japanese prime minister had done this Nixon goes to China thing. He supposedly was the more nationalist than his predecessor and was going to make things worse between Japan and China. But he went to China. They hit it off well, and one of their main sources of agreement was, North Korea must be stopped. They must not, conduct a nuclear test. So I thought, oh, good. Now China's on board. They have more leverage over North Korea than anyone. And then I wake up, and North Korea nonetheless conducted this nuclear test. Now, it would seem, if they're indifferent even to China's opinion, and China has the capacity, if China's on board, we could literally starve this regime into collapse. And you got to ask, why is North Korea so driven and to get nuclear arms at all costs? And I've got to think, what Bush has done for the last few years just could not have helped. He identifies three countries as being the axis of evil: Iran, Iraq, North Korea. He invades one of them. Okay, now right away you think, well, I'll bet if they had nuclear weapons he wouldn't have invaded them. Now you might say...
Well, he thought they did have nuclear weapons.
No, he didn't. No, nobody thought they had nuclear weapons.
Okay, you're right.
Nobody thought they had nuclear weapons.
They were developing, yes.
Right, exactly. And that he was going to get in there because we would not want to attack them after they got them. Moreover, I mean, you might say, well, doesn't North Korea still have the option, even if they're tempted to develop a nuclear deterrent, to dissuade this guy from invading the next member of the axis of evil? Couldn't they just kind of come clean and say, hey, we're going to be good citizens now? Well, no. I mean, Saddam Hussein let the inspectors in, let them go wherever they want, and I want to elaborate on that phrase later because John Chait kind of questioned the accuracy of that, and we've had some reader email on this, and we invaded them anyway. Okay, so basically, from North Korea's point of view, the strategic options are pretty limited unless you actually have a nuclear weapon. Because even if you let inspectors in and stop your program, we'll invade you.
There's the counterexample of Libya, which let the inspectors in, and we didn't invade and warmly welcome them back into the family of nations.
Well, we hadn't identified them as being in the axis of evil, and they weren't not a formidable country, you know.
But North Korea must have understood that they weren't on Bush's to invade list.
I think you're crazy.
Ahead of Iraq, where he had where the U.S. had a historic grudge, and also we had a war we'd fought and that wasn't quite finished yet.
Mickey, this guy is largely isolated from the reality of the world outside North Korea. Okay, he is not. There is not an efficient system of communication reaching this guy. I mean, I beg to differ. I mean, if we can sit there and develop a paranoid fantasy about Saddam Hussein having underwritten 9/11, I think it's reasonable for this guy to develop a paranoid fantasy about George Bush wanting to invade. It's a hell of a lot less paranoid and less of a fantasy.
The paranoid fantasy involves Muhammad Atta meeting with somebody in Prague?
It involved a lot of things.
But it wasn't a very widespread paranoid fantasy, I don't think.
Well, no, but if you read David Korn's book Hubris, it was quite influential at key moments in the decision to invade Iraq. It was a big momentum builder.
I haven't read David Korn's book Hubris.
Neither have I. I just listened to his two blogging heads' dialogues. The second of which was more actually informative. The one with Jim Pinkerton. I encourage it. I thought it was better than his Charlie Rose interview, personally.
Countries seem to want to have nuclear weapons. It seems to be a national aspiration. There are all sorts of benefits that flow from it.
Right.
And there's very little we could do to stop North Korea from getting them if, as you say, China does not want to participate in some sort of devastating economic boycott. Certainly the military option is very weak. It's weak. It would be weak even if we hadn't invaded Iraq and had our entire army ready to throw into the fight. Because within the first hour of the war, North Korea would have flattened Seoul.
Well, I don't know about flattening Seoul. They would have done serious damage, probably.
I guess you can argue that they wouldn't have gotten the bomb if things had gone differently. It seems to me that the main lesson of this is non-proliferation doesn't work. If a country really wants to get the bomb, they're going to get the bomb. And all the diplomacy in the world isn't going to stop them.
Well, actually, a lot of countries have refrained from getting the bomb. Some that could have it in a minute, like Japan, haven't gotten it so far. South Africa gave up the bomb. So no, there is such thing as an incentive structure that will get a nation to even give up a bomb or not develop it. There's no doubt about that. This was a tricky case. But I'd be hard-pressed to argue that the behavior of Bush's that I just described did not make it even harder, however hard it was going to be.
Do you think that it was unnecessary to sabotage the agreed framework? And that's the argument that was in the Washington Post today, which ex-Clinton aides are making, which is Bush seized on the North Korean cheating on the agreed framework to sabotage it. Instead, they should have tried to preserve it somehow, which is an argument I actually had never seen made before.
I don't know the details of that. I mean, I think that the truth is that agreement from the beginning was not tight enough, But yeah, I mean, look, and his whole kind of philosophy of just kind of not talking to people. He spent years saying, I refuse to talk to North Korea.
No, I don't understand the not talking to people. And clearly the next, if there's a Democratic administration, even James Baker has pointedly said, you have to talk to your enemies. That's how you make peace. And
I'm just saying.
I thought that was a weird rebuke of the Bush administration.
I mean, one reason I resist even saying, what do we do about this now, is because on front after front, you are in this position of people saying to Democrats and liberals, well, what would you do about it? when, Bush is the guy who created the mess. It wouldn't have been,
that's just the point. Bush didn't create the mess. The mess probably would have been created anyway. Your strongest argument is that Bush made it somehow more difficult to solve the mess.
Considerably more difficult.
In general, in a non-proliferation regime, some rogue regime sometime is going to be immune to your rational incentives model. They're going to get the bomb, and then what are you going to do about it? Because they can put the bomb in containers and ship it off to America's terrorist enemies around the globe. And that's an inherent problem in reality. It's not the fault of the Bush administration. And both liberals and conservatives have to figure out what to do about it.
Well,
and you do too. You can't just blame Bush.
Oh, I have ideas about that. But,
well, what are
Bush,
they?
But Bush, time after time, well, for example, try to shore up respect for the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Bush undermined respect for it with the nuclear deal he did with India. I mean, the guy just does little thing after little thing that makes the situation worse. And then every once in a while, the consequences come home to roost. And you say, well, what are you going to do about it now? And it just gets harder and harder. The guy is screwing up the world.
Do you think North Korea is going to respect the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Well, I mean, not now. Who knows? But I think, Bush did so many little things wrong. He wouldn't talk to them. He did this whole axis of evil thing. He invaded Iraq even though they let the inspectors in. We'll never know. He didn't handle the diplomacy with North Korea well. We'll never know. And there's no point in dwelling unduly on this. But I can't imagine anyone making a serious argument that Bush has not hurt the situation at least a little. Would you make that argument?
No, I'm not making the argument. I'm making the argument that it's a larger problem that Bush
Okay, but it's such a momentous problem that when the President of the United States complicates it, makes it worse by doing just manifestly stupid stuff, we should all stop and dwell on the fact. I mean, this guy is a disaster.
I'm not disputing that. I mean, I think the American people are coming to that conclusion.
They're taking their good time about it.
But I do think the important issue is what do you do with, as you say, weapons of mass destruction becoming more and more accessible to smaller and smaller groups of people. That remains whatever happens.
Well. Yeah, I mean, you got to start by talking to people. You won't get a deal with Iran if you don't talk to Iran, and that may be hard too. But again, that's a case where he's made it harder. The situation, the mess he's gotten into in Iraq has radically reduced the leverage we have with Iran because they can totally screw us anytime they want. They can make the Iraq situation twice as messy at the drop of a hat. The invasion in Iraq has turned out to be a weapon we have handed Iran, and that just makes things that much worse in negotiations. And I know you want to say, but Bob, tell us what you do now. That it is possible for a guy to screw up the world so thoroughly that you just throw up your hands. That's about where I am.
The Iraq situation is different. The Iraq situation is screwed up in a way it didn't have to be screwed up and wasn't inevitably becoming screwed up. Whereas it seems to be the North Korea situation or something like it is inherent in the dynamics of technology that you outline in your book Nonzero, Bob.
I've been alarmed about it. I'm just saying I would have done everything differently in recent years than it's been done, and that would have given you a better shot. It's a long story how you rehabilitate the NPT or else create something to go in its place. But just step by step, everything would have been different if I had been in charge. That's all I can say. I don't mean you would have magically rescued all these situations. I just mean there was a much more constructive approach possible. And I don't think we spent like 15 minutes on this. I don't think you want me to rehash how every step would have been different.
No,
I mentioned several things.
No, I want to move to the where do we go from here discussion. I mean, in the post they talk about searching Bush has a plan to embargo North Korea and search every cargo ship leaving North Korea. That doesn't seem like such a bad idea to me.
No, but I mean, if you're asking how do you solve the generic problem, you have to elect a new Senate first, because any generic solution to the problem that I outlined in my book is going to involve international inspections that are very intrusive from the point of view of the nation receiving them, and in order to get nations to agree, America is going to have to submit them to them too. That's not going to happen with a Republican Senate because they are obsessed with hanging on to sovereignty, even to a point that is destructive of our actual sovereignty. That is, our actual ability to defend ourselves.
Well, it's not going to happen with Bush as president.
No, or when we have a Republican Senate.
Well, right, but you're going to get a Democratic Senate before Bush leaves office, I think.
Now, that could be the transition to talking about Foley, even though the Senate isn't what he's in.
I think we're desperate for a transition here.
I think we are.
Okay.
Well, the Foley scandal is the kind of thing that you would have a take on and would have spent hours pondering.
Well, Mike, I'm actually less interested in the Foley scandal's politics. I mean, I think it'll fade faster than the mainstream media thinks it will fade, because people have sort of made up their mind. People make up their minds very quickly about this. They don't care really what Hastert knew and when he knew it. That's important to Hastert, but I don't think it's that important for the elections. And we know from we know that news moves faster and fades faster these days. So I think the Republicans have a window after the Foley news has faded to start making their case again and tightening up the race. What interested me more about the Foley thing was the sexual politics of it. Andrew Sullivan has constructed this elaborate PC rationale that actually hangs together surprisingly well.
What is it?
It has three elements. First, what Foley did had nothing to do with him being homosexual. As Andrew has written, there is no connection between homosexuality and an attraction to teenage boys, or at least no more than there is between male heterosexuality and an attraction to teenage girls. So
I would say that's about right.
So the first principle, let me lay out the three principles. The first principle is this is just the same as an old horny old heterosexual man hitting on young female pages. The second thing is it was evil. Sullivan and other gay groups like the Human Rights Fund, I think, Human Rights Campaign, have condemned it as evil.
Wait, it's evil on what grounds?
Well, that's one of the problems. Andrew sort of struggles with why is this evil. I guess it's somehow predatory, and even he's dragging these poor. Andrew can't bring himself to say, well, these people were undecided about their sexuality, and he was making the choice for them, because I don't think he really believes that. Mm. So he winds up condemning Foley for dragging him into the closet with him. But I guess if there were
you mean they would have come out had it not?
Or if there were no closet, would it have been okay? I mean, it's not clear. That's one of the problems. It's not clear what exactly they regard as evil. It's something to do with old men preying on young people who are dependent, as opposed to like meeting them in consensual relations on the internet.
Now, apparently, he did make a point of waiting until they were A, gone from Congress, and B, they were no longer pages, and B, were of the age of consent, the legal age of consent, before he made overt overtures. Is that true?
That seems to be the case, although he did show up one night drunk outside their dorm. Perhaps with an idea of having face-to-face negotiations. But anyway, the third point is that this whole thing is the product of the closet. In other words, Foley did what he did because he has this bifurcated mentality that you get when you're in the closet. And if there were no closeted gays, if everybody was out in the open, somehow the gays would have taken care of this. The sort of sensible, bourgeois, rational, moralistic gays would have dealt with Foley in a way that they were unable to deal with now.
Well, the perfect thought experiment for that claim is to imagine that it's a heterosexual male and female. It's not perfect, but it seems to me useful. And female pages, right?
Right.
And you're friendly to them, and you wait, and then when they leave and they're gone a couple of years, then you start, making Los Movitos.
And I think that's not as big a deal, but some people, they tend to be the fathers of young girls, think it's a bigger deal. So
yeah, I'm starting to think it's a bigger deal.
So what do you think?
Well, it's just an interesting question. I mean first of all, I'd be shocked if there aren't examples. I mean, you telling me that this strategy has been overlooked by Ted Kennedy? I mean, come on. Right?
Right. No, it sort of reminds me.
No chance.
Sort of reminds me of the New Republic in my youth. But
wait, you're going to have to elaborate.
I'm not going to elaborate, but
Mickey.
You know, in a lot of offices, older heterosexual men prey on young interns. Yes.
Well, at the New Republic, they were all of the age of consent already.
Well, no, I'm assuming that everybody's of the age of consent, but it's still a 20-year-old and a 45-year-old.
Well, the funny thing to me is that I think for the politics, in a way, maybe none of this matters, and you know, because the way I came to this conclusion is I was thinking about Hastert, and I actually have some sympathy for him because, you know, the truth is, we all go into damage control mode when our institution is threatened or our reputations are threatened or whatever. It's like, remember back in the days before the internet when somebody would write in a letter that seemed to find something factually wrong with an article of yours? Now, the first instinct is to think, now how can I answer this letter in a way that will make me look as good as possible? Your instinct isn't, I want to get all the facts out and all the truth out, because back in those days, you got the last word. You would answer, and that would be it, at least the way things were run in a lot of magazines. And so by and large, the answers to those letters were dishonest. It's just human nature. We're, in some sense, seeking less than the full truth. And in any event, you know, it's just, this is what people do. So for Hastert to kind of try to minimize things, it depends on what information was reaching him. But if all the information that was reaching him was, you know, he seems a little too friendly with pages, blah, 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 but there hadn't been any sex.
But that gives the lie to Andrew's point, because I think that instinct would be there whether people were in the closet and were not in the closet. They know Mark Foley. They know he's a nice guy. He's going a little crazy, hitting on the pages. And you want to take Mark aside and say, Mark, cut it out. And you're not going to have the big sit-down meeting, which they should have had, where they said, Mark, you have to quit Congress now for the good of the party.
Or say, the public deserves to know.
No, you wouldn't say that. You would say, Mark,
right.
quit.
No, you're not. That's what I mean.
You say, quit Congress now, so you won't be in this position to prey on anybody anymore, and the party won't be damaged. Just get out. And that's the meeting that in their weak management they were reluctant to have, and that's the meeting that human nature leads you to not want to have.
Exactly. And that's my point. But then my next thought...
that gives the lie to the whole point that the whole problem was the closet.
Right. Well, what I was going to say was, as far as the Republicans, the kind of most conservative part of their base is concerned, you know, conservative evangelicals in the heartland or something, I realized in thinking that through that from their point of view, it isn't that, you know, the question isn't, did Hastert know exactly what he was doing with his interns? What they don't like is when they find out that Hastert was even hanging out with a guy he knew was gay, right? I mean, I think on the right-wing part of the Republican base, that is kind of surprising to them, because they think, you know, and Karl Rove is partly to blame for this, the way he's exploited this whole issue of homophobia. They think of their guys as the guys who don't even hang out with homosexuals.
Democrats are really, if it was a man and a woman, it wouldn't have nearly the electoral valence that Democrats are relying on homophobia and the gruesome sort of, not the gruesome, but the shocking details of sort of homosexual dirty pages as opposed to heterosexual dirty pages, the shock of the newness to win the election for them.
Right.
Did you know, Bob, that Hastert lives with his chief of staff?
Is the chief of staff a man or a woman?
The chief of staff is a man, Bob. And
wait, are there serious rumors about Hastert?
Well, Lawrence O'Donnell on the Huffington Post is certainly starting them.
But what would lead someone to suspect that a guy who had been a coach of high school wrestlers,
right? No,
never mind.
It was just wrestling. No, that's why some people think that the homophobic aspect of the scandal sort of has legs. It's not the idea that there's this cabal of...
So wait, I honestly don't know. Hastert is not married or what?
No, I think he is married.
Oh.
But it's pretty weird to live with your chief of staff.
Well, it's so weird that you almost wouldn't... You know, if he were gay, I think he would do a better job of concealing it.
Correct. Good point.
But anyway...
It's hard to see how the Democrats aren't playing on homophobia unless you buy the idea that it would be worse if it was, a man and a woman. And I don't buy that idea, but I'm not the father of young girls.
No, I think the political valence of this on the right is totally grounded in the homosexuality, and it's not kind of, and it is just the thought that wait a second, you mean all these guys knew he was gay and still were hanging out with him?
Yeah. Right.
And like I said, the Republicans deserve it. They've exploited this kind of homophobia, and I hope it comes back to roost.
Well, but it's also possible that, as John Dickerson wrote in Slate, I thought he was crazy when he wrote it at the time, the Democrats could overplay their hand. I didn't see how they could possibly overplay this hand. It was such a rich hand. But
you think they have?
I think you see rumblings that they're about to. I mean, David Corn has his list of gay staffers, which he won't disclose, and that sort of reeks a little of McCarthyism, although I'm sure he has a point. There are all sorts of... I've gotten emails casting aspersions on people who I know aren't gay, in fact. And saying,
you have?
Well, sorry?
You have, personally?
I've gotten emails, yes.
How do you know they're not gay?
They've been forwarded to me. In one case, the person's a friend of mine, and I know he's definitely not gay, and yet he's somehow a right-winger, and the Democratic network is starting to tar him as part, on the all conservatives are gay theory. So it is possible to overplay this hand.
I don't like that whole business. I'm not in favor of that.
But what interests me is the Sullivan view that this is just the same, that there's no greater lust for teenage boys or emphasis on physicality among gays than there is lust for teenage girls among men. And that's a lively debate because there are people on the right who've gone on and said, no, it's just because homosexuals are obsessed with sex. They're not like us.
No, I agree with Andrew on this totally. And the difference is that the girls would be more resistant to the advances. Although,
Well, but that's the point. That's the point. I don't believe Andrew precisely because the men, when a pass at a younger man succeeds, that person is not resistant. That leads you to be more uninhibited about it and to think, yes, it's a good thing. And also there are no negative consequences if the person is gay, if the young person is gay, either like pregnancy.
Because it's harder for him to talk about it?
No, because the young man's not going to get pregnant and come to regret this encounter.
Oh, I don't think anybody worries about pregnancy anymore.
You don't think that's built into our genes, worries about pregnancy, Bob?
Built into our genes?
I sort of think it is, or built into deep-seated social norms that
I think there's 10 things to worry about before pregnancy when you're trying to seduce a young woman.
It just seems to me that yes, for PC reasons we have to say the situations are exactly equal, but they're not equal between you and me.
Well, no, but they are, at the starting line, they're equal. You may be right that because male homosexuals get more positive reinforcement for their advances, they then are less inhibited in the future. But I agree with Andrew that the baseline situation is the baseline lust is the same.
Well, but the baseline, the cultural barriers to acting on this baseline lust are less robust for a good reason. I bet there are also a lot more gay men who had a sexual encounter with an older man when they were 16, 17, 18, 19, and it was a good thing for them. It helped them, figure out what they were. A lot more positive than the experiences of 16, 17, and 18-year-old women with older men.
Well, I think it's true that it may be the case that kind of female psychology is more prone to damage in a situation like this. On balance, on the average, all caveats and nuances thrown in, which I don't have time to throw in. That you could make that argument. So it may actually be that yes, this is better. Male pages.
Well, right.
It's better to focus on male pages. Yes.
Okay.
So we endorse that, don't we?
If we had our choice, yes, I think that's a good way to get attention for Blogging Heads.
Yeah, and it's a great transition to whatever's next, which is what? Iraq or cluster bombs?
Iraq.
Okay.
I never thought I'd want to transition to Iraq, but
I think it would have been a smoother transition to cluster bombs. But anyway, Iraq.
Well, in Iraq, the news is the James Baker Initiative. I mean, everybody thinks the Bush administration is preparing some big change of course, and that people are sort of hoping they're preparing some big change of course for after the election. As John Dickerson points out, right now they're threatening a pullout in pretty much the same way that the left threatens to pull out to try to get the Iraqis to shape up and get their act together. If that doesn't happen, some dramatic initiative would seem to be in the offing. We have this James Baker Iraq Study Group, which is going to report after the election. There have been reports that it is going to endorse a sort of semi-partition of Iraq.
Yeah, although I've heard that both ways in terms of, I saw what Baker said, quoted it in a way that was the opposite after I sent you to the link to the one that quoted it the way you said.
Well, he said he doesn't want an actual partition.
Right.
And one of the things you would expect of Baker, that he would be very sensitive to the other governments in the region and sort of want them to get together and all enforce a deal in a way that they're not doing now. And that would be his guarantor of stability, would be to get the Saudis and the Turks and even the Syrians and the Iranians to get on board with it, whatever deal he cuts. So that couldn't be a full partition because the Turks wouldn't stand for it. It wouldn't stand for an autonomous, independent, sovereign Kurdistan.
No, unless you had really major firewall somehow.
Yeah.
But the encouraging thing, though, is that, as you said earlier, he's saying, first of all, you got to talk to everybody in the region. We talk, I believe in talking to your enemies, which in a way was a pretty remarkable repudiation of Bush's whole philosophy, Oh,
it was a definite repudiation. I mean, Baker's been sitting there seething in Texas, hating Bush for 7 years, so...
After getting him elected.
Right. Well, that's the
But
the bitterness.
Still, I mean, look, for this like committees or whatever it's called, this working group's recommendations to be enacted, you need some support from Bush, and that's why I was surprised to hear him utter something that so obviously, especially maybe when removed from context, would sound just like a direct repudiation of Bush.
That's a good point. Just getting back to the trivial and superficial electoral fixation, I would think that the rumors that there's a big sea change in Iraq coming would help Bush electorally, because at least leads voters to think he acknowledges the problems and is going to act on them. It's a little like Nixon's secret plan for Vietnam, which turned out to be stay the course. So Bush could say, well, I have a plan for Iraq, I'm not revealing it until after the election. So in that sense, it might be a mirage. There might actually not be a plan. But I agree, it's surprising that Baker would piss off Bush like that.
Yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, I'd rather have him running the show than just about anybody in the Bush administration, I think.
It's possible that Baker has, screw you ability vis-a-vis Bush, i.e. he knows where a bunch of bodies are buried. The problem with Baker is that he doesn't, he's too much of a realist and an Arabist. He doesn't want to set a democratic precedent in the region that will undermine the government of Saudi Arabia. And that's the worry. Whereas, really, we want the government of Saudi Arabia to be undermined in a democratic way, don't we?
I think that might have virtues in the long run, but my question is, how would you go about setting a democratic the whole problem is our attempt to establish a democracy in Iraq has just completely backfired. Nobody can figure out how to do that anyway. It's not like that's an option.
Well, it's not.
Baker just has to push option A and we'll have a functioning democracy in Iraq.
But if we have any stable situation where some of the tradition of democracy is preserved from this interregnum that they've had, that's a step forward for democracy in the region. No.
Yeah, but even getting there is a complete puzzle at this point. And meanwhile, everything's headed in the other direction. The government has recently enacted all these these kind of inhibitions on free speech. You're not allowed to say this. You're not allowed to say that. And it's just all moving in the other direction, if not toward chaos. I mean. No,
I understand, but assuming there are two stable outcomes, one which is reimposition of military rule and a dictatorship. And the Saudis are happy and everybody's happy, and the other is something that preserves at least some semblance of democracy. The worry is that Baker will prefer option A to option B.
I actually think stability at this point is so elusive that any rational person would just take the surest, the most likely route to it. And if that turned out to entail democracy, I can't imagine Baker saying, "Oh, sorry, we'll roll the dice instead of accept this kind of stability."
Of course he's not going to say that, but that might be a slightly more difficult lift than option A, which is the option that doesn't preserve democracy. But
maybe. I just think we've gotten beyond the point where we can be picky about things like democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're just trying to keep the region from going up in flames.
I don't quite see where partition solves the problems at this point. That's my difficulty.
As an abstract matter, I am pro-partition just because I believe that when you have a situation when a lot of ethnicities, they're at each other's throats, I think the surest long-term path to harmony among them is to first let each of them become secure in their own political identity, okay? And if that means giving them a nation or giving them a state within a confederation, whatever, fine. But facts on the ground make that more complicated to varying degrees, and there are certainly people who know a lot about Iraq who say that that would be problematic. Juan Cole is very down on it, and we can link to his latest item on that.
He made some arguments against them, and I'm looking at them right now, and they each have counter-arguments. He says Turkey would never stand for it, or Saudi Arabia would never stand for it. Well, the whole point of the Baker Initiative is to get Turkey and Saudi Arabia to sign off on some deal, so presumably he'll do that. The second is that the Sadr movement, the Sunnis, and the Dawa Party don't like it, and they have almost a majority in the parliament. Well, at some point, they don't like chaos either, and if this is the only way to solve chaos, maybe their majority will dwindle into a minority. And the third is that the Sunnis wouldn't get any of the oil revenues, or they don't have any oil, so they'd have to trust the Kurds and the Shiites to give them some of the oil revenue. And Cole points out, but they have the water because they control the river upstream.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until very recently.
So the makings are obviously there for a water for oil deal.
Yeah.
They give the Shiites the water, and the Shiites give them some of the oil revenues, and so that
win-win, man.
It's a insurmountable obstacle.
Yeah.
And the final one is that the Arab world would never forgive the U.S. for breaking up Iraq. Well, I'm sure the Arab world will get pissed at whatever we do, but I don't understand if Iraq was a colonial creation of Winston Churchill, and we undo this colonial creation, why is that such a terrible imperialist thing to do? It seems like an anti-imperialist thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think he's thinking about the realpolitik and these leaders just feeling in various ways politically threatened, not in a way that outweighs their ideological fidelity to anti-imperialism or something.
Well, the leaders will feel threatened. We want them to feel threatened. The question is, will the Arab street, and that's Cole's point, forgive us? We took this mighty Iraq and broke it up, I guess is the argument. And this shows that we're crusaders bent on destroying the Islamic world. That's sort of crazy, given that we allowed the Shiites to practice their religion. I would see where the Sunnis would have a beef, but I don't see where there's sort of some pan-Islamic beef.
Well, he was saying pan-Arab, right?
Yes, Arab and Muslim world. So
Arab
both.
and Muslim.
He's saying both.
Well, so much of it depends on how it shakes out. I mean, if you wind up having this larger swath of Shia Islam, part of Iraq plus Iran, maybe the Shiites would be happy. I don't know. It's kind of beyond my reckoning.
The other problem, of course, is will the Sunni rump state degenerate into a terrorist-spawning Afghanistan?
That is a commonly expressed fear.
And Juan Cole on the left sort of says, well, no, once the Sunni tribal leaders are in charge, they'll get rid of these Al-Qaeda extremists. And I just talked with a friend of mine who's back from Iraq, who said, no, that's crazy. First, the most violent people win, and so the Al-Qaeda people will win because they're the most violent. They will control the Sunni tribal leaders. And the second thing is this idea that over-the-horizon air power is going to stop terrorism is insane.
So?
And that's what Juan Cole's hanging his hat on. That when the Sunnis begin to march on Baghdad, the U.S. Air Force can stop them. Well, yeah, but if they send a few truck bombs a day, we can't stop them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, ultimately they can't win, they can't occupy without via truck bomb. But I haven't read his item. I shouldn't comment.
I mean, it seems to me our best hope is that the civil war will be so distracting to the Sunnis in Anbar that they won't have time to figure out how to fly planes into American buildings. But
that would be the upside of a civil war.
Yes,
that's a very upbeat way to look at it, Mickey.
Yeah,
that's why we have you on the show, to bring a message of hope.
I'm just an upbeat personality.
So am I.
especially these days.
So we should probably move on.
To some upbeat item like cluster bombs.
Cluster bombs. I was thinking, yeah.
That's tops of my happy hit parade.
Well, there was this piece in the New York Times about the cluster bombs left in Lebanon. Since the war between Israel and Hezbollah ended in August, nearly 3 people have been wounded or killed each day by cluster bombs Israel dropped in the waning days of the war. And
I was suspicious that they said there was 1 million of these things. That seems awfully high.
Well, 1 million of the little balls. There's a whole bunch of those in each bomb, right?
Oh, 1 million little balls. I thought it was 1 million bombs.
1 million little balls that'll kill a kid if he picks it up or something.
Oh, I thought it.
A number of kids have been killed.
I thought they said 1 million bombs, and then I thought it's only the unexploded bombs that are a problem. And the
bombs. No, I think the bombs can partly explode in the sense that the little balls that roll out or fly out, some of them explode, and then there are the unexploded ones. This is why cluster bombs are so devastating. They cover the landscape with explosive ordnance.
Oh, I thought they were devastating just the same way a shotgun was devastating, which is they send pellets around in every direction, and
this is an amazing admission of ignorance that neither of us is sure.
Yes,
but
I agree.
think it's like a bunch of explosive super balls rolling all over Lebanon.
I don't think so, but okay. But that is an issue that we should know about that we don't.
Okay. There will be a winner and a loser when we get to the bottom of this factual dispute, Mickey.
That's correct.
But I thought that was the rap in Vietnam when we used them, right? That the lefties were complaining that Vietnamese kids would pick up a little thing that looked like a ball.
Yeah, but I think it's the little thing is an unexploded bomb, not the bomblets left from an exploded bomb.
Wait a second. No, the little thing came out of like a warhead that had a bunch of little things in it, right?
But they're little things about the size of a light socket. They have a little white tail coming from them.
But each of them can blow up, right?
Sorry?
But each of them can independently blow up.
Yes, and they blow up and rain pellets along the landscape, but the pellets are not themselves explosive.
Oh, well, so there's pellets within pellets, kind of. I mean, each warhead has many explosive units in it, right? We should have done our homework on this. Anyway,
but the point is nobody can figure out why Israel dropped them.
Well, look, if it
What's
says,
your theory?
Look, it says United Nations officials estimate that southern Lebanon is littered with 1 million unexploded bomblets. So that's pretty clear. They didn't drop 1 million bombs, right? Well, and if they're unexploded, that means they're potentially explosive. So clearly, each bomb has a bunch of these little bomblets in it. Okay?
Yes, although it's not clear whether there 1 million bomblets were dropped, and 15 to 40% of them were unexploded, or more than 1 million were dropped, so that the 15 or 40% adds up to 1 million.
Well, some exploded, so more were dropped. But the UN estimate is that this is how many there are.
And my point is, I don't buy it. It seems high.
Okay. That's between you and the UN. Okay.
Okay.
One reason this interests me is, my standard point on Israel is that the problem is not, as Mearsheimer would claim in that paper, that America has been a friend to Israel. The problem is that it has not been a good friend.
Right.
Because if it had helped Israel solve its problems, like the Palestinian problem, that would help the U.S. And to the extent that Israel's problems go unsolved, or we don't restrain Israel from doing self-destructive things, that's bad for the U.S. So I'm willing to accept that our fortunes are intertwined. The problem is just that we're not serving Israel's interests with our policies, because we don't keep them from doing self-destructive things.
I understand that that's your position.
People often challenge that. I mean, whenever I trot that out, people say, no, you got to... on the far left you get, no, we need to separate us from Israel and kind of, whatever, let them go our own way. And in fact, I have a letter here from one of our emailers, Steve R., who has written more than once about Israel, and says, A good case can be made that the U.S. does not have to be in the Middle East at all. Israel is not going to be overrun, but even if that could happen, should the U.S. defend and support Israel in the way it has if the cost of that support is a 9/11 type attack every 10 years? Well, I mean, I think this illustrates, I think you're going to hear more and more of this kind of stuff if we do not help Israel solve its problems. And this is just such a perfect example of Israel doing something that I think is both self-destructive and bad for the U.S. I mean, three times a day, according to this, in Lebanon, one of these things, 3 people per day are wounded or killed, on average, by one of these cluster bombs. So that's like every day, people in Lebanon go, the Jews and the Americans are trying to kill us, because, of course, we supplied the cluster bombs to them. And, what Israel only did this toward the very end of the war, and there's speculation about why they did it. I just don't see any way it's got a big upside from their point of view, they're just sowing the seeds of hatred. And they're doing it in other ways. They're expanding they'd say thickening, other people would say expanding the settlements. And the U.S. continues to do virtually nothing about it. I mean, it's made token protests about the settlement thickening. And the Bush administration weeks ago said it was going to launch an investigation into whether Israel had violated the agreement on how the cluster bombs we gave it would be used. But, it seems like nothing is really going to come out of either of these things. And my point is just that this is another case where our reluctance to criticize Israel or rein in its behavior is ultimately bad for Israel. It's getting worse and worse. And I don't see any sunshine at the end of the tunnel here.
I agree. I think it's mighty convenient for you that you can say that America's interests are congruent with Israel's true interests.
Give me an example. Give me an example where they're not.
Well, there could easily be a situation where America's interest would not be in having a Jewish state, where if all we cared about were America's interests, we'd want a one-nation solution, wherein if the Arabs have more people, they win the election and it's not a Jewish state anymore. We were there for idealistic reasons. We want a Jewish state, and that costs us a little bit in terms of our national interests. And there's no way to sort of avoid that.
Well, first of all, I think you have to pay some attention to domestic American politics, right? There's no way that you're going to get America to support what you just outlined. And I think in the long run, there's no way you're going to get America to support, because of the domestic politics, what this guy is outlining, which is that America just disengage from the Middle East and, screw Israel. I don't think either of those things is going to happen. You have to pay some attention to the actual domestic political situation in America. There is a lot of support for the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. Fine. All I ask is that you judiciously pursue the goal of a healthy Jewish-Israeli state. And that's what's not happening.
Well, maybe that makes sense. It seems to me the issue is whether the Israel lobby has so much power, not assuming that the Israel lobby has so much power that it severely restricts our options. Then what can we do?
Well, I think there will always be a lot of pro-Israel sentiment in America. The problem is that now it seems to me misguided in its application, because at least the officially organized lobbying part of it keeps encouraging policies that are bad for Israel.
I agree with that. Once you accept your premise, which I do, that we want a Jewish state, then we're not being friends to that Jewish state. I agree.
Well, that's a relief.
But
surely somebody will write in and disagree.
One of the things that they'll do with these cluster bombs, and this is a brilliant segue here. One of the things they're going to do with these cluster bombs is they're going to put pictures of maimed children on the internet, and it's going to be used for anti-American propaganda purposes.
Yeah, there was a picture in the Times in this story, but actually this kid looked okay. It just looked like his legs got hurt. There were other kids. There was the description of a kid who actually got killed.
Yeah.
But
in this Michelle Malkin controversy,
brilliant segue.
She has put this this little video on YouTube denouncing Muslim extremists who killed Theo Van Gogh and Pim Fortuyn, and also putting in the protest against the Muhammad cartoons, and it got taken off YouTube. And in response, the Malkin people have pointed to all these inflammatory anti-Israel videos, most of which are still on YouTube, which show pictures of dead girls and killed by the Israelis, and little green footballs, and this blog Writing Sun that I came across point to some of them, and they're pretty powerful stuff. I mean, it's all about showing Israeli shoulders bang bang, and then a little girl is dead. It's a powerful propaganda.
Do we know what was in the Michelle Malkin video?
Yeah,
visually?
I've seen it. Yeah, you can see it.
What's in it?
You can see it. It's.
Where can you see it?
On her site.
Oh, I tried to get it on. I couldn't find it.
But anyway, it's it shows. It says, and then they came for, and then it shows people killing, and then they came for Salman Rushdie, and then it shows the killing of Pim Fortuyn, and then it shows the killing of Theo van Gogh, and then it shows the riots against the cartoons, and what's annoying about it is the way it sort of sneaks in the gratuitous showing of the Prophet Muhammad in order to inflame people, in a list of these other people who are arguably, it sort of allies all those things together, and it also shows the Prophet Muhammad in a way that's designed to inflame people. So the question is, do we want that on YouTube? And there's sort of two models. One is the Writing Sun model, which is that they should allow it all on YouTube. YouTube should just be a neutral common carrier, and let the Muslims put up their anti-Israel propaganda, and let Michelle Malkin put up her pictures of Muhammad, and this is free speech. And the other model would be, all this information is sort of dangerous now. YouTube isn't a common carrier. Maybe they should censor all of them, which seems to be and tamp everything down, which seems to be the model that YouTube is pursuing.
Okay, wait, let me pause. It's interesting that you realize that now. Because when you sent me the email suggesting this, you did not realize that YouTube actually was clamping down on Islamist, graphic violence posted on YouTube.
But
can I just finish? Because I think this reflects on Michelle Malkin's integrity a little, the way this happens. You wrote, how about Michelle Malkin claiming her anti-terrorist... You're proposing this as a topic. Claiming her anti-terrorist videos are censored from YouTube, while the actual terrorist videos of U.S. servicemen being killed are not. Now, at this point, you were under the impression that it was a dual-track policy. They're censoring Michelle Malkin, or at least this was her claim. This was her claim.
First, what are you doing? Next, you're going to be revealing my dirty IMs to you, Bob. This is private email correspondence.
Yeah.
Secondly, I said Michelle Malkin claims that.
Exactly.
The word claim implies
exactly.
that I was reserving judgment as to whether her argument
exactly.
was true or not.
It's understandable that you would think this is her claim, because she artfully words her little YouTube protest video in a way that would lead the viewer in a hurry, or the naive viewer, to think that that's what she's saying, but technically she's not. Here's what she says. This is a video she put up on YouTube. Since they censored her, this was like a letter to the editor. Instead of focusing solely on jihadists exploiting YouTube, those sickos who have been posting snuff films of jihadist snipers killing American soldiers, the YouTube crackdown is targeting those of us who unapologetically criticize the throat slitters who would bomb us back to the Middle Ages. Now, if you missed the word solely, instead of focusing solely on jihadists, which you apparently did when you saw it, you would think that it's like a dual-track policy. The fact is, YouTube has a consistent policy it's trying its best to enforce, and it's not discrimination against Michelle Malkin. Another little bit of disingenuousness on her part is the following, where she says, after this, she says, I've been an active YouTube user for months. Our conservative YouTube group is nearly 1,000 strong. And guess what? The conservative YouTube group has now been flagged. Then she starts reading in this sarcastic voice from the email she got from YouTube. This group may contain content that is inappropriate. And if you listen long enough, at the end she says, flagged by YouTube's user community. In other words, she got flagged because YouTube has a policy that if any users want to flag any content, they can do it. This was not a decision by YouTube.
The question is that a model we want? Do we want a model
No,
where
that's not the only question, Mickey, because this is another one of your right-wing chick friends. The question is, would you say that this video of hers is honest?
Michelle Malkin's not a particular friend of mine. I mean, she's an ally on some issues like the immigration, but I don't know her.
Okay, fine. What's your judgment? I mean, I think this is, pathetic. If you watch the video and watch how and she also pulls this one. She says, when she reads YouTube's policy about they don't run unlawful, obscene, ethnically offensive stuff, sounds like hers was ethnically offensive, etc. She says, there was nothing unlawful, obscene, blah, 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 ethnically offensive in this video, unless you're a terrorist or insurgent sympathizer, I guess. So, right, we suggest that YouTube is an insurgent sympathizer. That's out of Ann Coulter's playbook.
Elsewhere, she describes her video as innocuous, even though it shows pictures of Muhammad. So it's
yeah. I mean, look, you're the one who wanted to do this.
I don't sympathize with the anti-Muslim worldview that says, the only possible reasonable solution is we can show anything we want. We can show pictures of Muhammad. It's blah 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 blah. And the only way to solve the problem posed by Muslim extremists is to be in your face and fight back, etc., etc. I am not in sympathy with that worldview.
Well, I mean, I don't think we should make it illegal to do that. And this is the common confusion. There was this post by a Daily Coast diarist that you referred me to. And this guy says, I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be siding with Michelle Malkin. But, as a matter of principle, anyone willing to defend the right of that Dutch newspaper, which this guy, Pierre Tristram, had done, to publish the Muhammad cartoons, has to take Malkin's side in her little spat with YouTube. Well, let's wait a second. First of all, who was saying that the Dutch newspaper didn't have the legal right to do it? Even I didn't say that. Just about everyone concedes that. Secondly, if the emphasis is on the legal right of the Dutch newspaper to publish whatever it wants or whatever it doesn't want, then in this case the publisher, that would be YouTube, presumably has an equal amount of autonomy and can publish whatever it wants and whatever it doesn't want.
I agree with that. YouTube has no obligation. YouTube could say we're only going to publish liberal left videos or right-wing conservative videos. It's their business. They can do whatever the hell they want with it. But the question is society better served? The larger question, which you're avoiding, is society better served by a free-for-all system or by a censored system? And I guess there are varieties of censored systems, one of which is you let the mob decide. So if a majority flags something as offensive, it gets taken down. And the other is you have some sort of independent elite deciding what gets taken down. And I think it's a difficult issue.
Well, my position, this is what I set out my position in an op-ed that got Ann Coulter to call me a terrorist sympathizer, which is that legally people should be able to say or whatever they want, but we should have a system of moral sanction in place, as we do. There are various taboos in the United States about saying things that are ethnically offensive, and it's time that we tried to carry them to a global level where there are some things that greatly offend some ethnic groups that we really discourage. And if people say them, then we shun those people.
This isn't a question of shame. This is a question of does YouTube put it up or not?
Does YouTube put it? Oh, I absolutely support the right of YouTube. And if I were running YouTube, I think I would be pursuing roughly their policy, which is to not let the terrorists and insurgents put up their graphic stuff, and not let Michelle Malkin put up roughly as graphic and calculatedly ethnically offensive stuff. And I haven't seen the video, but that's kind of the way you described it, I think.
I don't.
Well, you said kind of look, it's offensive.
It's an effective video that has images of violence. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I should reserve judgment until I've seen it.
I'm not going to say I'm not going to say it's as graphic as pictures of U.S. soldiers being blown up. Because it doesn't show anybody actually being killed.
Yeah.
But no, I think we're basically in agreement. I think YouTube has to pursue a policy. It's better if YouTube pursues a policy of taking down things that it thinks will be very offensive in the interest of having a civil dialogue. It's not a question of First Amendment. And I think probably it wasn't crazy of them to take down Malkin's stuff, but they should be very assiduous in taking down the Islamic extremist stuff too. And the problem is they're sort of incapable of doing that just technically. A lot of the sites are in Arabic. There are more of them. There's only one Michelle Malkin. There are hundreds of thousands of jihadis putting up these videos.
Yeah, right. Apparently, they have trouble censoring the ones that are in Arabic. Yes, that's a real frustration of YouTube's. We should move on and do a little viewer email, but I'm having trouble finding the viewer email I wanted to do. Meanwhile, Mickey, I have an analogies test for you. You took the LSAT and got into a really good law school, right?
I guess so.
And you did well on your SATs, I'm sure. So you'll be good at these analogy things. Here's the question. Okay.
Regatta.
Lee Siegel.
The answer is always regatta.
Lee Siegel is to sprezzatura as blank is to Lee Siegel.
Lee Siegel is to Lee Siegel.
No. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, Mickey. Got any thoughts?
You mean there's no answer you had in mind? You just wanted to bring up the subject of Lee Siegel because you know it's a...
Give it some thought.
Hit attractor?
Maybe our readers will want to opine. Maybe someone at the New Republic will have an idea. Who knows?
Are you saying the answer is Leon Wieseltier?
Oh, Mickey, that's a horrible thing to say.
What do you say?
Mickey, no. Could we flesh out the allegation you're making here a little? Are you saying, Mickey... that Leon's attraction to Lee Siegel is that Lee Siegel will, A, attack the people that Leon doesn't want to be seen attacking, and B, will attack them in this coarse kind of reptilian core of his brain way that Leon himself would be ashamed to be associated with. Is that what you're saying?
Charge. Your charge is that Lee Siegel is Leon's suck puppet the way Sprezzatura is Lee Siegel's suck puppet.
Mickey, I did not say the answer was Leon. That was you, buddy.
No, I'm talking about our previous dialogue. And I'm not agreeing with this. I'm just saying you've made this charge, so step up to it like a man.
No, I didn't make that charge. Did I?
The previous dialogue, you implied that Lee Siegel was somehow
our viewers the videotape
in a way that I didn't buy.
Go find the dingle-link, as they say on Blogging Hits. Go find the dingle-link.
I will find the dingle-link. Let's go to the dingle-link. It's like Warner Wolf.
Oh, wait. Here's some of the email. Quickly. Just a little. Don't get impatient. Okay. Here's one that is the subject heading is Bob's a weenie.
Yeah, that's
okay. I'd say two things. One, a surefire way to get your email noticed by me is to put in the subject heading Bob's a weenie.
Right.
And a surefire way for me not to read your name or your email on the air is to put in the subject heading Bob's a weenie. Okay? No weenieism on Blogging Heads.
That's you're being very YouTube-y here. Okay.
Although, David Korn broke the F-word barrier.
Great.
It was actually MF, but I don't think it's going to be like an avalanche after this because he was quoting our president, our dear leader, President Bush. And I think the rule should be you can only use the MF word if you're quoting the president. And now that'll limit it somewhat.
I think the rule is you use it when it's wildly relevant.
The first line of this guy's email is, can you give me an example of an apology helping Bob? And one answer is, if he apologizes for calling me a weenie, maybe we'll read some of his future email. Here's a guy, are you going to proceed with the comments section, which we've been testing? Within a couple of weeks, yes.
Great.
And we should do other house cleaning.
I sense that there are James Baker-like big things due for Blogging Heads TV.
Well, there is going to be this new homepage, which should be out kind of in about a week and a half, we hope. And about that time, the comments section will show up. So there are some changes coming. But there's another change, which is, we didn't remember to say this at the beginning, that you and I are going to be doing we're going to be generally doing ours on Wednesdays now.
Right.
This is the last kind of first of the week time for us. So they'll be showing up either very late Wednesday or early Thursday.
Cool.
Important housekeeping.
But I can't believe you're pissing away the big rollout of the new website just by saying, there'll be a few changes next week, man. You should have a big party in New York with, Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that.
Show a little promotional savvy.
No, you don't want to get expectations up unduly.
Well, many
of the advantages of the new design.
You're not in danger of that.
What?
You are not in danger of that.
Thank you. Many of the advantages of the new design are advantages from our operational point of view, although I do think it brings greater convenience to the user, and the comments section will presumably be valued by some people. Although I worry about us having a comment section, because most blogs have an ideologically coherent group of viewers, but because we have people of different ideologies on, we do not. And so I'm worried that open warfare will break out, and I encourage people to be civil.
But they all agree that you're a weenie.
No, that's only one person has expressed that view.
I deny that.
Speaking of this ideological diversity, on the Pinkerton Althouse dialogue, someone writes in, Todd S., could you please warn us in advance when the content is so far to the right? We probably will not get around to that. You'll just have to remember who is far to the right, I think.
Well, Pinkerton's all over the map.
Well, neither one of them is totally stereotypical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grow up.
No, well, let's not talk that way to our viewers.
At least I'm not like Chris Hitchens, who always ends up giving the finger to his audience.
Elizabeth Kay sent in that thing which I forwarded to you, asking you to watch her movie, which was being shown that night. Her movie Yasin on Southern California. Did you watch it?
No,
nice going.
I didn't
Thanks,
see that.
Mickey.
I didn't see that.
Well, we are running, kind of running out of time.
And we're not on 1.1 anymore. We were going to say that.
Yeah, we wanted to say that. The people have spoken. We asked, did you want the thing sped up by 1.1 to 1.1 by default, which it was for a little short period of time. Overwhelmingly, the view was no, and we.
Yeah, I thought that was the way of the future, but
you were wrong.
Everybody disagreed with us.
You were wrong.
So.
Oh, should I not get into the Iraq inspectors thing? I mean, I'll save these emails for next week because we're running low on time.
I think we've had enough on the intrusive inspections for.
No, but this is important because I asked viewers to get clear on this. You know, because John Chait came on and acted as if Saddam Hussein had really prevented inspectors.
Okay, well, what's the answer? Quickly, what's the answer?
Answer seems to be that there is not a case where the UN said, we want to inspect this, and they were ultimately prevented from doing so. There are some qualifications to that, like apparently, you know, he was very sensitive about this palace issue. You know, he thought it was an insult to his dignity. So I gather from one of the emailers that the UN decided, well, we'll inspect one of the palaces just to show we can do it if we want, and we'll leave the others alone. I don't think anybody thought the palaces had weapons anyway. But some viewer kindly referred me to the webpage. This was Patrick Y., where 2 weeks before the war, Hans Blix, the weapons inspector, testified to the Security Council. Initial difficulties raised by the Iraqi side about helicopters and aerial surveillance planes operating in the no-fly zones were overcome. This is not to say that the operation of inspections is free from frictions, but at this juncture we are able to perform professional, no-notice inspections all over Iraq and to increase aerial surveillance. Needless to say, Bush chose in response to invade the country, and the rest is history.
Okay, I encourage people who have actual evidence that that's wrong to send it in.
Yeah, well, there is one from the aforementioned. No, he's not aforementioned, is he? Wayne S., who says this is. He's the one who asked about the comments section, I think. This is kind of a hobby horse of his, and he did describe one anecdote where inspectors were stalled outside somewhere for days while convoys of trucks drove up to the back door and emptied the complex of every document, file cabinet, and piece of furniture. I recall one such incident where one of the inspectors got a rifle butt in the face. When they were finally allowed in, an Iraqi general was sitting at a bare desk in a bare room claiming the facility was the marriage license repository. I'd just like to see like a URL, a link to some documentation of that. I do actually remember, as I said, that at the very beginning, the inspectors were sometimes left cooling their heels. But as the thing progressed, they were being given essentially immediate access to everywhere they asked. Okay. And that was the situation when we invaded. But I encourage viewers to send in like links to actual news sources when they say things, and I'd like to see the link to that. It may be true, who knows?
I knew it was a mistake to get you going on intrusive inspections. We're like Ted Koppel. We're like running over. Nightline used to run over and trample on whatever came next. So
yeah, but that's the beauty of this. Nothing comes next.
But remember what happened to Ted Koppel.
Yeah, I know. 30 years after he began that pattern, he was unceremoniously...
Right.
Something.
So let's avoid that fate.
Okay.
See you midweek next week, I guess, right?
That's right. It should be Wednesday and show up Wednesday night, Thursday morning.
Cool.
Okay, see you around.
Take care.
Bye.